Before we begin, if you have any questions during the presentation, you can type them in our parking lot. We have a parking lot for you in the chat. If you're having difficulty accessing that parking lot, you may go ahead and type your question in the chat. We have a QR code. It may or may not work. It's working for some and maybe not for others. So we have a number of ways that hopefully if you have a question, but I'll also take questions at the end. So you may be able to ask me a question as well. So if I cannot answer your question tonight, though, I'll follow up with you. So I'll collect your name and your student's name, as well as any other contact information and the best time for me to reach you. So I will follow up if there are additional questions that you still have. All right, let's take a look at the objectives for this particular meeting. I'm going to explain the role of the resource teacher for the gifted, which is also referred to, you'll hear people use the acronym RTG. And I'll talk about my role within the professional learning community. So we got a lot of acronyms, the PLC, but I'll explain a little later what that means. I'll also give you an overview of gifted services at Dorothy Ham Middle School, which is consistent with what is happening across all our middle schools in Arlington. And also I'll provide you with an overview of just a brief overview of the identification process for gifted services in Arlington Public Schools. The National Association for Gifted Children, which is NAGC, it recommends that every school provide certain supports for gifted children. That would be access to having curricular resources that are designed specifically for them. Assuring that there is a substantial professional development for all teachers who service gifted kids, understanding the needs of those gifted learners, differentiating instruction for them, understanding how flexible grouping works. In addition to that, NAGC recommends that resource specialists, and that's the role that I would play because I'm the individual who supports our classroom teachers, helping them to be able to assess those gifted learners when we see it necessary in the curriculum to be able to make adjustments, as well as integrating any advanced strategies or incorporating advanced curriculum as well. The Virginia Department of Education actually regulates each school district. And so as part of that, we have to create an APS local plan. And in that particular plan, it identifies how services will be delivered for students who have learning needs that are actually beyond what is offered for our regular instructional program. So we do have that APS local plan. If you ever want to look at it, it is on our APS Gifted website, and you can find out specifically what it says. I'm going to give you an overview, but if you want to find more detailed information, it's available on our APS website. So let's take a look at this visual here. The daily differentiation, which is this is how we provide gifted services for our students at the middle school level in APS. If you take a look at it, it really starts at the bottom with the district level. They are our foundation. And we start with the talent development. APS is a talent development model, so we look at how we are able to support all students to reach their maximum ability. And part of that is the Young Scholars model. So we do have a model where we're supporting those underrepresented students. So even though I work with gifted students, I also go in the classroom and support all. And that's part of what we do here at the district level and how the program is set up. They also provide us with a variety of services. They provide us with the curriculum that we need to teach your students at that level. We have a number of stakeholders. We have a parent group that supports us. We have other individuals who work as supervisors in other departments. So at the district level, there are a lot of individuals who are instrumental in making certain that gifted services are being delivered. And also we have an evaluation of the program. And many of you may have provided some input through a survey over the past few years, which I'll talk to you about a little bit later, because that survey is one of the reasons why our gifted model is going to look a little different beginning next year. All right, and so once we move from the district level, we're at the RTG in school. So that's where I am. And that's what I do. I provide professional learning for teachers. I help with training them with how to identify students and how to provide services for them. I work with them in terms of coaching them on, how to utilize the resources that they have to provide that advanced instruction. I collaborate with them. That may mean going into the classroom, modeling for them, and supporting students in that way. Also at the school level, we have cluster grouping. And so that's our service delivery model that we use. Cluster grouping means that your student will be placed in a particular content area with their intellectual peers. At this particular year, we've increased the number in preparation for next year to 10 students. In some classes, we don't quite have 10. We weren't able to reach that number simply because some students are in foreign languages, or they may need to attend music classes. So they have really specialized classes. So in that case, we have met the 5 to 7 gifted students in a particular content area. So nearly all of our classes will have that number that service our gifted students. And then finally, the cluster teacher. The cluster teacher is the classroom teacher. And so they are the primary deliverer of gifted services. Again, the general classroom teacher, they are the primary deliverer. How do they do that? They do it through differentiation. They are providing instruction at various levels for children in the classrooms. They are monitoring their growth. They're looking at their progress. And also they're utilizing some of those resources that they've received through professional learning and our coaching sessions. They're utilizing those strategies to help increase the rigor for our classes. So in this first part, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about professional learning communities so that you understand what that looks like. In a professional learning community, it's somewhat of like the umbrella, uh, and within it, there is what we call CLTs, or a collaborative learning team. So that just means that you have all of the 6th grade reading teachers, they meet together in a group. All of the 8th grade social studies teachers, they meet together and plan instruction for their students. So that's what we're calling those CLTs, or collaborative learning teams. So while the teachers are in those meetings, and they actually meet twice a week to plan instruction, by the way, but while they're in their meeting, they have key questions that they should focus on. And so this is where we are in terms of, this is part of what I'm doing as well, as it relates to professional learning. Helping teachers to understand how to effectively participate in a CLT. What does it look like? How are we supposed to service students using this particular framework? And so we have these questions that we discuss in our meetings. Number one, what is it we expect our students to learn? So we're looking at those learning targets in the curriculum. How will we know when they have learned it? Well, we talk about, should we give them maybe a quiz or an activity? Should this be a project? How are those students going to demonstrate? So we brainstorm and think of a number of ways that we think it would be best for them to show their learning. Then we have the third question: how will we provide time and support when they don't learn it? So then we have to start looking at our schedule and determining, okay, if these students don't get this particular skill, how will we provide that additional support and scaffolding so that they're able to learn whatever the particular target was? The fourth one is, if you see it's highlighted, that's the one that where my focus is when I go into the meeting. I do support them with the other questions, of course, but my focus is always, how will we extend learning when students already know the information? What are we going to do? And so this is where I began to provide some of that coaching to give them suggestions. And I'll talk a little bit more about how that works. One of the things Arlington has, and the great thing that this year we're actually working on teams. And you may have heard your kids like, I'm in sixth grade, I'm a sea serpent. They've got all these cool names now, the Falcons, the Ducks. But one of the reasons why the teams are so helpful is because the teams are comprised of all of the content areas, social studies, science, English teacher. Those teachers are all on teams and they share the same students. And because they share the same students, they're better able to support them. They could talk about what's working in your classroom. How are you able to support this student? Maybe you can give me some suggestions. So we have the Arlington tiered system of support, and it actually really works within that whole PLC framework because now we can sit in our team meetings and we can determine if a particular student has academic or behavioral needs. We can brainstorm, come up with some ideas and things that we can do to support them. So the PLCs or the CLTs where the teachers are meeting works really well with the ATSS process that we are using to support the whole child. And so again, it's just a full process of, what is it that students should be able to do, whether academically or behaviorally? Uh, what are some of the reasons why they are not necessarily reaching those goals? So again, we put ATSS in place when those students need support academically or behaviorally. And then we sit in those meetings and we create an action plan for them. What are our interventions? What are we going to do to support this student in these areas? And then we evaluate what we've done. So again, the ATSS structure, along with again, very excited to be in teams to, be able to discuss some of those strategies with teachers and how we can support our students. So let's talk about what my role is in the PLC. I told you a little bit about it, but I go in and I'm really there to talk about that gifted pedagogy and helping teachers to understand daily how to differentiate with their students, having them to look at their students and determine where they are. Are they needing additional support? And even though gifted students are gifted students, they may not be gifted in every single area or every single skill. So sometimes, again, they will need to look specifically. That's why it says daily differentiation, because when it comes to some skills, some students, even if they are gifted, may need more support. If the students are working on level, or if the students have demonstrated that they've mastered it already, what are they going to do? So my job is to assist them and support them in that area. And also, I do a little professional development with what we call critical and creative thinking strategies to really engage the students. So those are some of the things that I would go in and provide professional learning on. But I also go into the classrooms and I model this for our teachers as well. And I'm actually going to share a couple of those critical and creative thinking strategies with you just a bit later. I'm also there to support teachers and helping them to document how our students are growing. Creating those portfolios where students can see their progress throughout the school year, and looking at for different skills how they are how we are differentiating for them. And again, I also work with teachers to help them to understand that gifted learners have very diverse characteristics. Oftentimes, people will think, oh, it's a gifted learner, and why aren't they coming into work? And so we want to, this assignment needs to get finished now, or this needs to happen, or that happens. every gifted learner does not necessarily come in and tick all of those boxes, but it does not mean that they are not a gifted learner. So part of what my job is to help my colleagues to understand that uh, giftedness may manifest differently in different students. We have students who may get anxiety. They are capable of doing it, but we have to work with them with those strategies and helping teachers to identify that. Or when we have those students who just don't work and they're like, they're not motivated, helping teachers to find out what that student's interest might be and how we can approach that student. So that's part of what I do, looking at that student as an individual, also focusing on those social, emotional characteristics and talking with teachers about those to provide that additional support. And also, I'm the individual that leads the teams that will do the screening and identification. This is not something that I do as an individual. I am just the lead of that team, of each of the teams at each grade level. So as we identify new students for the program, as we are screening them, it is made up of administrator, we've got the counselor, we have math coach, reading coach, librarians. We have a lot of individuals who attend that meeting to participate in the screening process, but I would serve as the lead in that process. All right. The other thing that I do is, as the RTG, I am an advocate. I advocate for those historically underserved populations. And one of the ways that I do that here is I serve on our school's equity committee. And part of that equity committee is I'm always looking at it from a variety of lenses because I have to consider who our underserved populations are. Who are those learners that may need additional support? Those would be our twice exceptional, also called 2E, meaning they may be gifted learners, but they also may have some other exceptionality where they may be receiving special ed services. I'm also looking at English learners because we have students where English is not their first language, but they may be gifted. And oftentimes you see that when they are taking some of our gifted screeners and they have these really high nonverbal scores. And when they're able to really do that, the math, the quantitative piece is there as well. And so my job is to help advocate for those students to be able to receive gifted services in the areas where they're showing strengths. I also look to support students who are high ability and low income students. So those students who need additional support may not be recognized. You see that when you're working with them in the classroom and they're working with some of their peers. And I've seen them work alongside many of our gifted students. And these students may not have some of the same resources. They may not have the resource of having a, a tutor working with them or a parent who would be able to work with them, but they still have that high ability that we recognize. And so we look to provide that support and I work with them. And also those students who are underachieving students. And those underachieving students I talked to you about before, those are gifted students who may not be motivated to complete assignments. So we have to give them that extra nudge. And a lot of my colleagues will say, I'll go in and I was like, oh no, look at these scores. This student really is able to grasp these skills. And sometimes I'll go into classrooms and I'll shadow the student and monitor them. And then they get everything done when I'm in there oftentimes. And so that really goes to show their teachers that this is a student who's capable, but we've got to look at some strategies to make certain that they are demonstrating that in the classroom. So I advocate and support those students too. The first group I mentioned would be our 2E students. Those are the gifted students that have uh, also an IEP and maybe receiving special education services. We look at how we're providing those wraparound services for them. They've got a carrier, there's the special ed coordinator, the school counselor. As the gifted resource teacher, it would be great. Obviously, my input working with those students because I do understand many of the characteristics and helping to figure out how maybe they're some of the challenges they're having in their classes might be masked. And so you don't see the giftedness because they are having some other challenges that we may need to support them with. So those would be some of the support that we give for those 2E kids. And so how does that happen? What are their needs? Differentiation. And again, looking at how to best support those kids because oftentimes they may need some areas where we may have to come up with some strategies to figure out, well, they can understand this skill, but this part we may need to differentiate. So I look at those things to try to help. Accommodations, do we need to maybe change the placement of the student where they sit in the classroom? Do we need to provide audio support for them? So I'm making those type of recommendations for our kids too. Looking at those twice exceptional kids, sometimes they need social emotional support. Maybe they are dealing with some challenges with perfectionism, where it's just they're in an impasse. They can't get the assignment done because they want it to be perfect and they just can't move any further. So again, working with them with some strategies to help them through that. And also with 2E kids, early identification, because like I think I mentioned earlier, sometimes uh, if you're working with students in a class and then they come with these really deep ideas, and I'm like, that took a lot of critical thinking. Being able to recognize the ability that those kids have and figuring out a plan sooner than later would be one of those ways to support them. We have 2E kids or twice exceptional kids that have executive functioning. They need challenges, so they need support there. They may need to get that additional support with their agendas. Are they recording information? Are they making lists? Are they chunking their work? And those are things that I would support students and teachers. And also just self-determination, knowing that they can do this. And so sometimes they need that extra feeling to help them to feel that extra nudge to help them feel empowered. So at our school, what does that look like? Well, I may give a lot of input to our special ed teachers or counselors about how we can best support those students who are on IEPs or students who have a 504. I have also attended the meetings when I'm available as well to again provide a little insight about gifted characteristics and how that may be impacting the student. At our school, the special education teacher is there. They're also providing input. And so we are working together. It's a collaboration, it's a partnership, just to really provide those students with support. The same thing goes for our English language learners because in many cases we're seeing some similar challenges. So we have that same type of wraparound support with the school personnel. And so in this case, I would work with our English language teachers to provide support and give them suggestions on things to do with those kids who will need additional help with building background knowledge or making certain that they are looking at on grade level content, but at the same time, how do we help them with that to be able to access that information? And then again, I am bringing in those critical and creative thinking strategies that I'll talk with you about in just a bit. So part 2 of this session, we're going to look at what it looks like in the classroom. I often get calls or questions or emails a lot about the gifted program, and my student does not believe that they're receiving or gifted services, and they're not sure what it looks like. And so this is a great opportunity to explain to you what it looks like, because for students, if they don't leave the class, if they don't see the teacher coming in to work with the classes, they assume that they're not receiving it. Sometimes people think that being in the gifted program means doing projects. So I really want to help you to better understand what it means at Dorothy Ham, so that you'll know that we are working toward that process of making certain that we're providing um, those services for our students. So there are different ways. You keep hearing me use that word, differentiate, because this is how we provide services in the regular classroom. One of the ways is to differentiate by content, and that just means what students are learning. We're looking at, you know, is this information that they're seeing on their level? Do we need to make it more challenging for them? Uh, Many of you have seen your students taking reading tests and things of that nature. With those reading tests, we get Lexile scores. So we have an idea of where they're reading. And so we may need to challenge them by giving them more challenging text. So again, that's part of that content, looking at the different ability levels and differentiating according to that. Another way is through the process. And so we're looking at how students learn at different levels. What are their interests? What are their preferences? What do they want to do? And so maybe they want to do some research on World War II because that's what their area of interest is. One of the things that we have done this school year is to provide our students with a survey. It's called Knowing Your Strengths. And part of this survey, I think it was like about maybe 56 questions. It was a lot of questions. But we're asking the questions in different ways to find out what our students' strengths and gifts are, and helping them to recognize those. Now, by the way, they should have um, you should be able to see the results because they were asked to take a screenshot of it. So if you want to ask them, hey, let me see what happened, what your results were for your strengths survey. And so part of that, they found out maybe I'm a visual learner, or I am very verbal. I like to participate in discussions. I like debates. Maybe they are very logical learners, and so maybe that their strength may be math. So we learned a lot about the kids because not only did they take this survey, but we also had them to also complete like a questionnaire to go along with it, to find out what their favorite classes were, what some of the projects, tasks, things that they've done in their classes before that they were most proud of. And we looked at that information to figure out, why were you proud of this? What is it that what is it about this particular activity? So again, that helps us to learn a little bit about what motivates your student, and what it is that they're interested in. And then finally, we differentiate with the products. So we're looking at oftentimes when students are completing things, sometimes they'll say, the final product, this is, well, the way I'm going to demonstrate that I've learned this content is I'm going to create a PowerPoint, or I'm going to create, we have a group of students right now, they're creating like their own little TV broadcast. Somebody else decided, I want to do a talk show. So we have a number of different ways that kids are utilizing products, things that are realistic, authentic, real life ways that they can show their learning. So this is what we mean when we talk about differentiate. And this would be one of the ways that I provide professional learning to teachers to help them to understand how to differentiate with their students using those learning targets. And here it is again, a little bit more in detail where you could see some of those things in terms of uh, the content, what is to be learned. We're looking at varying the text that they're using, building upon their strengths, um, teaching strategies in areas where they need help. We've got the process. How do they actually acquire information? Do they need to be placed in flexible groups? Do we need to pace them differently? Do they need to work at things at a faster pace? Do we need to slow it down for them? So all of those things are part of the process. And again, looking at the product itself, what's their learner style and how would they best do that? Show their learning. And then lastly, one of the things I didn't mention before, but that's the learning environment. And even the classroom. At the beginning of the school year, I also went into many classrooms and supported teachers with how to arrange their classroom, giving them feedback on what would be the best way in arranging the desks, for example, how to set up the walls so that the walls are, and you would think something with walls, maybe something that for some kids who already have issues focusing, not too many posters, just the right amount. So those are things I may go in and just take a look around the room to figure out how is this probably going to work for some of our students who may need additional support in that area in the classroom.
Regina, you do have a question about differentiation specifically. Do you
Okay,
want me to
can
read
you
it
go
for you?
ahead and, sure.
The question is, where can we see if or where our child has gotten differentiated instruction? For example, where can we see the base assignment and what was added to the enhancement of that assignment? I went ahead and typed in the chat that differentiation is delivered in a variety of ways. Sometimes it's
Mhm.
tailored to the needs or the child's interest. So if you want to elaborate a little bit on that.
Absolutely. So one of the things that we do here is we will have a differentiation report that comes out, and teachers will be providing that information next week. So I should post it to the website by Friday. It's the interesting thing that you're asking about the differentiation is because we're looking for something big a lot of times, and it might be something minor. So there are so many things throughout the project. Let me give you an example though. So for I'll think about I think they're working seventh graders did the outsiders. So there are a number of ways they may be differentiating with that by providing different levels of supports in terms of the graphic organizers look different. All of the kids are not using the same. Maybe when they got ready to have the final product, it was not the same. Some students needed different supports for how do you um, what are some suggestions, for example, for sentence stems? Some kids had more advanced sentence stems, some had some simpler sentence stems. And again, a lot of these things might look different for kids where the teacher may just pass out, okay, this group is working with this and this group is working here. So when you're asking me about specific things, one of the things that would definitely be a classroom teacher question. The differentiation report is where you're going to see, and I'm trying to look at the report as they're working on it to make sure that they're listing, here's the activity, and next to the activity, I'm saying, okay, write down what are the 2 or 3 things that you may have done next to it. So when you see the report, look at whatever the task was, and then look next to the task. Now, which one your specific child got received is that's going to be different because that would take almost a few secretaries in the classroom to kind of mark those things. But again, the classroom teacher could probably mention, probably share some of that with you. Some of it is done even informally. And so when I say informally, they may do questioning that is informal. And so that may not be something that is recorded where they can show you, but what they'll say is we've done different question stems. And
Thank you.
so
Oh,
another idea, and I'll leave it at this, has to do with the flexible grouping is when students are placed in different groups. And we have those homogeneous groups where they might be working with their peers. Well, a lot of times kids don't know what the other group is doing. It may end up being the same target, but the other group may have a higher level text where it's been differentiated. They don't see that the words, the vocabulary words on their text has been adjusted because they're higher and more challenging. It's still the same story, but the story has been adjusted. That's what I'm talking about. It's um, so many different things that you can do like that. And so we're not making announcements. And that's one of the things that I like to uh, make sure that we mention to the teachers. And I say this with teaching gifted kids is that we want to make certain that number one, they understand that all students have some type of, gifts and talents. So because we are a talent development model, there could be a kid who may not be a gifted student, but they have a particular area that they're very strong. So we try not to have it set up like, okay, now we're headed to the gifted science. We don't have, and by the way, we don't have a gifted science class. What we have is sometimes where we're providing extra support in some areas, just depending upon requests from the teachers. But look for those differentiation reports and look for the specific task and see some of the ways as part of the report. Okay. The other point that next thing I want to mention to you has to do with collaborative teaching. And that's where I'm actually working with the classroom teacher, or sometimes you have teams working together to collaborate and, with teaching a particular skill. So we are in the process of working with a number of strategies, because I'm also trying to get to the point where maybe on some tasks, students may uh, kind of rotate from teacher to teacher on that same team during that class period. So that maybe in one class they're doing this task at this level, another in a different level, and another task here. And so that would just be one way of collaborating with one another. But again, we never place children in groups where this is your group, and no, they're flexible groups. So the groups may change from week to week, day to day, even though they may have their home groups, meaning when they come in the classroom, they may report to a specific group. But the goal is, as they're working through different tasks, they maybe move to other groups where students they could probably get the best support, or they would be able to work with their peers where they would probably be able to grow the most. We have co-planning, and I say that with the collaborative teaching because we have our special ed teachers in the classroom providing support. We have our L teachers in the classroom providing support. So oftentimes we have our paraprofessionals in there, teaching assistants that are in there. So even if I'm not in the classroom, we have many individuals who have received training as to, and we've been in the CLT meetings having discussions, or I've come in and modeled. And one of the questions that I get in terms of the collaborative teaching, we have 415 students who have been identified gifted in one area or another, some of them in four. And I'm one individual. So clearly, I would not be able to go into every class with every child every day. So what I try to do is, that's why the differentiation approach and the classroom teacher being the major or primary deliverer of services is the best way to really service all those students. But I do go in and say, for example, I'll go to one English class and I'll, go into first and third period in one class. Another class, it may be second and fourth. Another class period, it may be fifth. And so again, you have to think about, I'm doing that for grade level 6, 7, and 8. I'm doing that in ELA, social studies, science, and math. So in a particular week, and I think I was mentioning today to our assistant principal, in a week, I may have taught Algebra 1, I've taught the solar system in 6th grade, I've gone in and I've taught personal narratives this week in other classes. Socratic Seminar, 7th grade, The Outsiders, which means, of course, I would have had to have read the book. So I'm throughout the building. And so I try to create a schedule so that I can, make some contact with your student in one class or the other to get to meet them. And so that is my goal throughout the school year. Oftentimes, once they do meet me, I was walking down the hall today and someone's like, Miss Boyd, I shared, they're working on NaNoWriMo, and I just really wanted to see if I have a good start here. Can you take a look at it? And so they recognize how to reach out to me. So you can also ask your student as well. And many times they will email me if they have a question about something. And so I try to support them in that way after they have followed up with their classroom teacher.
Regina, we have
Uh,
one more question, and I know
sure.
we may be getting short on time here.
Okay.
We have another parent who has asked, it's a number of questions, and some of it you may have touched on. A couple of questions here. The classroom teacher may provide additional challenge. How do I know the additional workload or enhancement has been assigned to my student? Should I follow up with the subject area matter with that teacher? I would say yes for that.
I
I
would
think,
say yes, because they can tell you specifically, they can give you the
yes.
specifics of what they have done. Absolutely.
Where is the differentiated report that you're referring to?
It's going to
Where
be
can we
on the
find that?
Dorothy Ham website. Go to Gifted Services tab. Beginning next Friday, we will have the first one. You'll probably see the ones if you want to get an idea of what it looks like. You'll probably see the ones from last year that are still out there, and they'll be out there until next week, just so you'll have a better idea. One of
And
the
then the last
things,
question
Mhm.
was, how do I know, in terms of homework, how do I know that it is gifted identified homework versus normal classroom assigned
So
work?
Right. So you probably would not know if it's gifted assigned. What I will say is occasionally you will know if your student is doing what we call curriculum compacting. Sometimes students or teachers will give a pre-assessment and the student will master 80% or above or 90% or above. And what happens there is then we may decide to give them an alternate module in Canvas. And that's how you know they may have a different module altogether, and then they'll be working from that module. But if that's the case, the students generally know. I have a Canvas course set up, a gifted Canvas course set up, and still working on building and developing it. I do have some kids in it, and some of you probably are able to access it because you're following your students. And so as they work in their Canvas courses, you probably can see it. So students who have been working with me either through, and I'll mention shortly, if they've been working with me probably on some of those alternatives that they've received in the classroom, then they would already be in that course. For those of them who are doing the enrichment, and I'm going to mention that in just a moment, but it'll show we're working on things like the DHMS Social Studies Fair, the Science Fair, VJAS, Virginia History Day. Those are the types of things that what I'm doing with students is they're learning some things in the classroom, and one of the things that they can do is utilizing these projects because this is where it takes it to the next level. This is where those skills that they are learning in the classroom are really being extended through these outside opportunities. And teachers are providing, allowing them to do that in the classroom. And so they do have opportunities to work on it in class. Okay. I
Thank
mentioned to
you.
you earlier, okay, I mentioned to you earlier about the critical and creative thinking framework. And here are some of these different strategies that we talk about: problem-based learning, Jacob's ladder. We do a lot of Jacob's ladder here in our English classes in particular. PMI, which is plus minus, um, interesting. So you got just a number of different ones. One of my favorites, Raft. I've got a group working on Raft with Moon Strategies in 6th grade. Can't wait to see. I see their script. It's going to look great. Today and this week, we've been working on Socratic Seminar. So question formulation technique. We've done again, that was in another class, we've done that. So the things that you see here, these would be examples of the higher level tasks. Here are some examples. Science, I know they did the mind mapping. So if you ask your kid in eighth grade science, did you do mind mapping? Yes. Eighth grade ELA, did you do the mind mapping? They should be able to show you examples of that in their notes or things that they've done with the mind mapping in class. And I know that that would be one of the strategies that I worked with our teachers using that too. We did habits of mind. That's another one. That we used as part of our social emotional learning, and we also used it in the classroom. So this list is provided on the Arlington Public Schools website. So if you want to take a look at the gifted services on the APS website under gifted services, take a look at these critical and creative thinking models and strategies. You will see these, and then these are examples of how your students are receiving that. So if you've heard them say that they had a Socratic seminar, this would be an example. But we have many different ones. Look for those things on the differentiation report, and it'll give you a little bit more specific information. Here are some of the resources that we use through Vanderbilt, William and Mary, um, uh, the DBQ project. Those are some of the major ones that we use at Dorothy Ham. In the classroom support, again, collaborating with the teachers to plan the advanced content. The structure is there with the clusters. The kids are in clusters. And so they are in there with their peers where we are working on those creative and critical thinking strategies, and again, supporting those all grades 6 through 8, working with the underrepresented populations. Just to give you an example, and I think somebody had asked about this earlier, so maybe this will help. I think we did the question formulation technique in ELA. Not think, we did. And we did that because particularly with the some of the gifted students, to help prepare them for Socratic seminar. And so one of the things that we did with our when we did some reflections and we did a debrief, we talked a bit about, okay, why do you think the QFT was helpful for you? They said, oh, well, we had better questions now. We had these open-ended, thought-provoking questions. So it really helped to prepare them a lot better. Accountable talk. It's really impressive when you hear the kids utilizing those sentence starters. And they have all these different sentence starters that they can use to move the conversation along. And they sound like little adults in these conversations. It's so cool to watch. Cornell notes. Many of you remember your Cornell notes from college days. And so they learn about how to create Cornell notes. One thing that's not on here would be the double entry journal, which is another great piece. And so they have been utilizing that, Socratic seminar, and writing conferences. In sixth grade, we've been doing a lot with writing conferences, and particularly I've been working with students to talk with them about how to elevate their writing by using introductory clauses, how to, you know, vary their sentence structure with compound and complex. So those are the types of things that you'll hear or see when you see that they're doing sentence quizzes or sentence tests, because we're helping to build those skills to improve their writing. A couple of contests, we had the PTA reflections. I think we had 18 entries. That was one of the ways for students to be able to develop their uh, English skills, because they were able to write stories, and we had poems as part of as part of some of our entries. We have an upcoming contest, the Dr. Martin Luther King Literary Contest. I think the entry deadline for that is November 8th. So that would be another way in English language arts that those students are able to develop their writing skills. And I'm looking at this picture here. You have a group of, I think those are seventh graders, and they are reflecting. They had a Socratic seminar, and they are writing their reflections, thinking about some of those things. How did their thinking change? So again, it's really challenging when you're looking for specific things, but we could have a classroom discussion, and we're saying, how did your thinking change? And I think about something profound a student said. She said, I never looked today. She said, I never looked at something from that perspective until, she mentioned her peer. And she said, and then I looked at things differently and just some of the questions. But again, those are everyday practices that we have in the classrooms. In math, we've got Dreambox. Many of your kids are, that they're working on Dreambox. It is computer adaptive, which means as they are working on it and their skills improve, it gets a little higher in terms of what they're able to, the types of questions and problems that they get. We did sign up for a Scholastic Challenge. It doesn't start until after January, but that's one of the things with the math. We do have several upcoming math competitions after January. Math Counts is happening now. So if you have a student, we are looking for students to participate in Math Counts with Mr. Iholzer. So again, look on our DH Dorothy Ham page with services and looking at our clubs, and you'll see, I think it meets on Tuesday, but you may want to check to see when Math Counts meets. The Virginia going to be at Stock Exchange game again. It also starts in January. So for those kids who are interested in learning more about stocks, uh, that's one of the programs. It's also great, obviously, for that social studies, because I know they have that. They work on economics there as well. And then we're integrating some of the Kagan strategies. One of the things that I would recommend that you do is to follow our math coach, and that's at Heather Donaldson. So again, I would encourage you to go to Twitter and visit at Heather Donaldson. I'm going to call her the social media queen. I got to do better. I was like, oh my goodness, it's amazing. So if you take a look at her site, she's posting in there all the time the wonderful things that the students are doing in math as she's going around in those math classes. So I would encourage you, as we are advertising for students to come in and participate in these upcoming math challenges, please take a look at that. Obviously, we will be posting it at other places. We announce it a number of places. We announce things on the broadcast. We put it on the school website. I'll have it out there as well with the gifted services. So as we are adding things, keep that in mind. Let me say this, the list that I talked about with the critical and creative teaching strategies, all of those things are listed and they can be done within the math content area too, many of them. Science, we have the DHMS Science Fair. We have VJAS, which is that Virginia Junior Academy of Science. Again, these are all of the ways that students can extend their learning in science. Sixth grade, they've got a book study going for the solar system, 2001 Space Odyssey. Sixth grade science, you'll see pre-assessments. Eighth grade pre-assessments. We're looking at things that they understand and deciding which students need more support and which students are able to do some different things. And then we have experiential learning as well. So thinking about how, here's some pictures of kids who are, we're taking them out on field trips. We're differentiating at the field trip. Oftentimes I'll go, and I wasn't at this station. I think I did another station or classification. But one of the things, I went in with question stems and helping students to understand how to look at some of these skills by using critical reasoning skills. And this kid on the left side, I don't know if you could see this, he's got a sandwich there, and we were kind of having lunch. And of course, he's like, okay, let me test this. And he pulls out this little plastic and he's heating up his sandwich there with the sun. And so it was amazing. So again, even many things that we're doing, we try to take every opportunity that we can find and make it an opportunity for learning. Social studies, DBQs, those document-based questions, that is um, really brings in rigor. If you've heard your student talk about DBQs, and we differentiate the DBQs so the kids can see them, we have one version. They're all the same DBQs, but it's a different version. So they may not know a version that another student has. So version is a little more advanced, and they may have a different link, and the other group may go to a different link. So question formulation technique is another one. Every class is great to know how to create thought-provoking questions. We've got the DHMS Social Studies Fair that we're preparing for in January. The VA History Day for the winners of the Social Studies Fair. And one of the things with the VA History Day, students are encouraged to look at what they're learning in the classroom and extend their learning with these projects. I have had a session after school, and as well as I've been working to plan some Phoenix time sessions with students who need a little bit more support or who want to extend their History Day projects. So that's another way. Eighth grade, you'll see they do a lot of pre-assessments and novel studies and social studies. Just an FYI, we were 2022 winners of the Sons of the American Revolutionary Citizenship Award for last school year. And I started this position halfway in the year. So we were late. I happened to find out about it. And I was like, well, we're going to get a team together. I think we put together a team in about 2 weeks and we were able to walk away. But more than that, we students were able to see what they were learning in the classroom and how they could take those skills authentically and go and present in a number of different formats. So please make sure that you encourage your student to participate in our social studies fair. And we have a specific module on our Gifted Canvas course to support them with that. What I do for the teachers, professional learning and coaching. We do have pre-assessments. I've done workshops really focusing in on how to create those pre-assessments for students. And that's so important because what we don't want to do is teach kids things that they already know. And the importance of creating pre-assessments that really help them to know where they are entering, what the entry point is, how much support will they need. I've done the QFT, I've done differentiation, and I've worked with them with something called the equalizer, showing them different ways to look at instruction and figure out how can I make that adjustment to the tasks for our students, how to group students. So we look at professional development. How do you group students? How do you move those students in different groups? How do you decide who works in which group for which assignment? All of that is part of training. I've done a 16 Habits of Mind. And last year I did a book study and I'll be doing it again. And it's called Thrivers. And I've got the book here. And I actually want to offer this for parents as well, because as we worked through the book study, and I haven't been parenting anyone for many, many years now. However, I would have loved having this particular resource, and it's called Thrivers: 7 Teachable Skills That Set Happy, Healthy, High-Performing Kids Apart. This is such a wonderful book. And so I would like to offer a book study. And so I'll provide you the link for that if that sounds like something that you're interested in, maybe in January. We're looking at January and April of having that particular book study that, as parents, we can, you know, sit and, do a little reading and talk about some of these strategies and you would be surprised at what you'll learn. But this is one of the ones that I've used with the teachers. How do I communicate with you? The differentiation reports on the school website. The growth portfolio shows mastery. So you should be able to look at your students' portfolios. They have portfolios in different classes. They should have portfolios where they have their names, and you can see how they're progressing. And it's a Google Doc, by the way. We have parent information sessions. This would be one. We usually have at least two. We have this one where I give you an overview, and in the spring, early spring, well, not quite spring, but January, February, I have another one to talk a little bit about how we identify students, and if you're interested in identifying your student for gifted services, and I'll have a session for that. But I'm going to do a third session this year. And the reason why I'm going to do a third session is because next year, the gifted services model will change. Many of you have provided feedback in the surveys where it's a little challenging for you to figure out what's going on. And that's probably why I'm getting a lot of the questions tonight that has to do with differentiation, because you're wanting to get more information about how your child is receiving differentiation. So one of the things that Arlington Public Schools has done is they have created a new APS local plan for the next 5 years. And as part of that plan, the gifted services for middle school, we will now be offering intensified courses for English, social studies, and science in addition to math. So math will still continue as it has been, where there will be prerequisites. And so your student will have to be referred for a math course. But for the others, they will be open enrollment. And so we will have those classes set up for those high performing classes. And so I'll talk with you more about what it looks like. We're in the planning stages right now. And so we're setting up the cohorts with the teachers around the district, and they're working together they're utilizing the same curriculum, but they're going to work on what the strategies that they're going to use, what will the assignments look like, how will they differentiate those particular assignments. So that's what we have, teams of teachers, or we call them cohorts. And beginning this month, they will start working to create what those activities, lessons, and what the curriculum will look like for next year. So many of you, if you are 6th and 7th grade parents, um, look forward to that happening. We will make sure that we give you advance notice about when that meeting will be so you can learn about the process and how you can sign your student up for those classes. And the goal of that is that we could have um, fewer, even with gifted students, we still have students who are working at different levels. So there will be some differentiation, levels of differentiation, but not as much as we're having right now. And so this is going to benefit all parties, all stakeholders by having intensified courses for English, social studies, and science. Uh, Another way I'm going to be communicating, obviously, with the classroom, I'm sending information. Sometimes the classroom teachers will contact you. There is a Dorothy Ham Gifted Services page on our website, and then I also have a Twitter, which is at RTG_Boyd DHMS. And how to get connected, we do have an APS website. So you can go to Gifted Services. A lot of the things that you've heard tonight and more, you can find even more resources are available there. If any of you are interested in serving on our Gifted Services Advisory Committee, they work alongside with our gifted supervisor. They do have monthly meetings to from 7 o'clock to 8:30, excuse me, on Mondays. So let me know if you're interested. There are a couple of email addresses here. carlisle.levine@gmail.com, and that looks like geastman@cornerstone.com. So if you think that you want to serve on that parent advocacy part of that group, and you want to have your voice heard, and you want to represent other teachers and other parents and other students, and even, maybe you have some ideas that you'd want to be able to share, let me know if you want to be a part of that committee. How can you contact me? My email is regina.boyd@apsva.us. My phone is 703-228-2929. Our gifted services supervisor is Cheryl McCullough. And so her information is actually on the APS website, so you can find her email and phone number there. Parent resources. We are nearing the end. There are a lot of parent resources. These, by the way, these resources, the websites, I have them listed on the Gifted Services page. So Virginia Association for the Gifted, they have a lot of great parent resources. A lot of times they have free workshops. If they do, I'll let you know. I sent one out last year. There was a really good one that for 2E kids. So all the parents of 2E kids. So they have different ones. The National Association for the Gifted. I'm actually a member of both of those organizations, so they are always sending me information. And I'm making copies of different things, articles. I put them in the teacher's boxes. We talk about them. So that also helps with professional development, participating in some of these organizations, really just staying abreast of what's happening, the newest information with gifted services. And then finally, we have supporting emotional needs of the gifted, which is another parent resource that you might be interested in. So I have 3 listed here, but if you go to my page on the website, I actually have more. And just quickly, as a reminder, I mentioned that I'm going to have the screening meeting in January or February to talk to you about the process for those of you who are interested in having your students in the gifted program. This week, we have been administering the COGAT, which is the universal screener that we use for this school district. If you are new to Arlington Public Schools, uh, and you probably have come in maybe late last year or early this year, your student would have been tested 6th and 7th grade. I think 7th was today, 6th yesterday, and we'll be testing 8th graders tomorrow. And so again, once I receive those results, I'm actually going to have an early screening, because depending upon the results, some of those students will be eligible for automatic referrals. So again, if that is the case, once I get your students' test results back and I see their results, then they may qualify for an automatic referral. The good thing about that, we're working on teams now, which means the teams meet like twice a week. So I can easily go into the team and collect the data, ask them to bring samples, and have other members on the team, like the counselor, and the counselors are usually in the team meetings anyway, or an administrator. So this is one of the ways that we can streamline our screening and identification process. So again, if you have a student who has taken the COGAT this week, I am going to do an early screening identification process for them. Okay. So look forward to more information about that. And so, as part of the screening, just so you'll know, we don't use just the screening, because even if your child does not receive those marks that are required, we have a 120 score and above and on the different batteries, we still look at their academic performance in terms of their grades. We look at their math inventory, we look at SOL scores, we look at how teachers may hold student conferences. We look at those portfolios to see how they are progressing. We look at some of the products that they have made. And so we utilize all of those. We look at children holistically in this school district. So I hope that gives you some idea. Keep in mind, Referrals are not just made by teachers. Teachers can refer, but as a parent, you can refer your child. Community leaders are, and we say community leaders because we have kids who are in nonprofit organizations, and sometimes they're the leaders of those organizations will send in a referral. Students can actually refer themselves. So that gives you just a little bit of information. I have a timeline here, which lets you know, and again, this only applies to those individuals who are looking to, uh, you know, refer their student and have their student screened for gifted services. And what we're doing now would be the fall parent information meeting. All right. And I had mentioned to you before, we're going to have a meeting coming up, maybe January, February in the winter. Um, Specifically for screening. And there's a process that I have to follow. And so you'll learn more about that in January, February. So now, if you have any additional questions, we'll go to the chat. I'm going to stop sharing because I can't see anything but my screen. So I'm going to take that down.
And Regina, I want to make sure that we are also aware of the time so that parents can get to their kids and their little ones for the night. It is at 7:43, so maybe if we give it about 2 minutes. We do have a question. When will the COGAT results be out?
In December. We are told that we will see the results in December. And I'm going to go ahead and put the link if anybody is interested, excuse me, in the Google form for the book study. I hope it works because it is done through APS. So hopefully it'll allow you to sign up. Okay, other questions? You see any additional questions? And if you want, if you would like to go on the mic, you can, if you want to ask a question.
There was one question about when the classes would be offered, but I answered it that it's not offered this spring, but next school year.
Next school year. We are in the planning stages. We are preparing for it this school year, and next school year is when, right. So it'll be for 6th and 7th graders for next year. Those who are in 6th and 7th, obviously 8th graders, once they, leave, they'll be on a different, AP and some other options. Anything else? Someone said, does that say asks for permission? Oh, is that to speak?
I think it's they're not able to speak.
Okay. All right, let me see if I can do something here to let this individual speak. See what happens when we don't have to do virtual teaching any longer? We no longer become an expert. Well, they update some of these things all the time. Okay, the form. Oh, the form asks. Okay, so that might be, I'm wondering if that's the issue. And I say that because it is, let me see if that helps. I'm going to make a change. All right, the form, and see if that'll help. All right, what other questions do we have in the meantime? Any additional questions for the good of all? You're always welcome to call. Again, I'm at extension 2929. You can email me. I have set up conferences. We can have a Teams conference if you have specific questions for me. Let me
Regina,
know.
would you like for me to type your email address in the chat?
Please do.
Could you please just say it out loud for me?
It's Regina, Regina.Boyd at apsva.us. I think because I put this, here's what I would like for you to do. Can you send me an email if you are interested in participating in the Thrivers book study? Because I think it's because it's created in Arlington Public Schools. Unless you are using your student's iPad, it probably won't let you access it. I think that's what it is. We have everything. Now you know your student is very safe because unless things are being used within our within our system, it usually blocks them. So that's for their safety, which is great. Okay, somebody said they signed up through their daughter's account. So absolutely. Yeah. And so if you just take your child's iPad, it'll allow you to sign up. Uh, I don't have anything else for the evening. I will remain on if there are some additional people who have, if you have additional questions, I'll stay on. But for other than that, we will stop recording. And thank you so much for coming. And I look forward to working with you and your student this school year. Take care.